morning, church. Give me just 1 second. So, normally I have a joke or a video or something, but I'm sorry to disappoint. I have none of those today. So you just have to listen to me. Right. So, but before we start and I go into my topic, let us open up in prayer. Father God, I just thank you for, God, just being who you are, God. I thank you that your presence is in this place, God. I thank you for the worship that went forth beforehand. God, the worship and singing, the worship and giving, God, the worship and just ministering to you, God. And so I pray now that as I speak, it won't be me speaking, God, but it'll be you speaking through me. Father God, I pray that every word I say would be what you want me to say, and if not, then let me not say it. God, I just pray for every heart and ears in this place, God, that they'd be attentive, that you'd be able to take what I say and break it into pieces so that everyone can understand at their level, Father God. And so I just thank you now, and I just pray that you'd have your way in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so the title of my message today is called The Plateau, the struggle of a complacent Christian. So, you ever notice when people talk about, where they are in their relationship with God, they talk about being on the mountaintop, right? Or they talk about being in the valley. They make songs about the hills and valleys, right? But they even talk about the journey in between the valley to the mountaintop. But how many people ever talk about the plateau? There's a certain cry, right, that comes from the person on the valley. The person in the valley, their heart's cry is, God, I need you. God, I can't do this. God, take this. I need you. There's even a cry that comes from the person on the mountaintop, right? God, I want you. You are everything to me. I just want to learn more. I just want more. I just want to experience more and draw more. I just want more. God, I want you. But what is the cry from the plateau? What is the heart posture of a person who has plateaued, who has become complacent? So this message, and I'm being honest, is probably one of the most transparent messages I have spoken, because if I'm being honest with you all, I have been stuck on this plateau for months. Okay, so when I talk about the struggle of a complacent Christian, I'm talking about my life. I'm talking about myself. But thank God, in Jesus' grace, I'm fighting and I'm on my way out of this thing. So when I talk about these things, it is literally from my firsthand experience. Okay, so today I want to talk to you guys about 4 things. What does the Bible say about complacent people? That's 1. What is the mindset of a complacent person? What is the problem of being complacent? And then how to get off the plateau. So how to stop being complacent, right? So we could diagnose this problem, but I can't just leave you and say, you're dying. All right, see you later. You know what I mean? So we're going to diagnose it and figure out how to get out of this thing, right? So, but before we do that, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. When I say plateau, I actually have a picture of it, of a plateau. A plateau has 2 definitions, right? The first being a level of high ground. It's a flat level of high ground, right? And the second one, which is what I want to focus on today, is the state of little or no change following a period of activity or progress. So you're doing stuff, and then you just kind of stopped, right? And so complacency also has 2 definitions. The first being self-satisfaction, especially when accompanied by unawareness of actual dangers. Or the second one is uninformed self-satisfaction. So let me use this in a sentence. This has to, deal with what we just talked about yesterday. It says, when it comes to safety, complacency is very dangerous, right? So it's when you're content in your ignorance, or you're just comfortable with where you are and you see no need for change, right? So to become complacent on a plateau in your life and in your spiritual life is where there's no change, right? Or no progress, and that is dangerous, right? So complacency isn't just a modern day problem, right? It's something that they were dealing with back in the Bible times, like back in the day. And how do I know this? Because if it wasn't a problem, they would have no reason to address it. Right? So they say no running in the halls. Why? Because people were running in the hall. You don't address something unless something happens in which you need to address it. Right? So complacency can be found in both the Old Testament and the New Testament. So in Proverbs 132, it says, "For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them." Right? And then in Zephaniah 1:12, it says, "And it shall come to pass at the time I will search Jerusalem with lamps," this is God, "with lamps, and punish the men who are settled in complacency, who say in their hearts, the Lord will not do good, nor will he do evil." These verses are pretty straightforward, right? So the complacency of fools will destroy them, right? And God will punish anyone who has become complacent in their hearts. Other translations say for this verse that, those who have become complacent in their sin, right? Complacent, stagnant, they've just gotten comfortable in it, right? So what does the New Testament have to say about complacency? Are you guys still with me? Am I going too fast? Okay, all right. So in Hebrews 5:11 through 14, it says, this is Paul speaking, "There is much more we would like to say about this," in which they're talking about Jesus being our high priest, "but it is difficult to explain, especially since you are spiritually dull and don't seem to listen. You've been believers so long now that you ought to be teaching others. Instead, you need someone to teach to you again and again the basic things of God's word. You are like babies who need milk and cannot eat solid food. For someone who lives on milk is still an infant and doesn't know how to do what is right. Solid food is for those who are mature, who through training have the skill to recognize the difference between right and wrong." So basically, Paul is saying, there are many things that I would love to talk to you guys about. But because you become completely spiritually complacent, you won't get it, right? So complacency is the death to growth of any kind. Whether that's in your regular life, your spiritual life, friendship life, it is the death to growth of any kind. Right? And then the last verse I want to read is found in Revelation, 2:1 through 5. It says, "This is the message from the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, the one who walks among the 7 gold lampstands." Just so we know, that is Jesus. Okay? He says, and he's talking to the church of Ephesus. He says, "I know all the things you do. I've seen your hard work and your patient endurance. I know you don't tolerate evil people. You've examined the claims of those who say they are apostles, but are not. You have discovered they are liars. You have patiently suffered for me without quitting." Basically, he's like, you guys are doing a really great job. Like, I appreciate all the things you guys are doing. You're great. But I have this complaint against you. You don't love me or each other as you did at first. Right? And then it says, "Look how you have fallen. Turn back to me and do the works you did at first. If you don't repent, I will come and remove your lampstand from the place among the churches." Right? So Jesus is saying to the church of Ephesus, you guys are great, man. You guys have been working hard, not tolerating reckless and evil people. Y'all been suffering patiently for me in my sake and in my name. All of these things are great. But in the midst of you doing all of these things, you've gotten complacent. So you might think, how's that possible? They are literally doing a million things. They're doing all these things to the Lord. How could it be that they've gotten complacent? And that's because complacency is a heart condition. Right? Jesus said, you don't love me like you used to. You've gotten comfortable in our relationship, meaning like it has plateaued. Right? I know this firsthand, that it's possible to be very active in the church and spiritually complacent at the same time. Right? It's like when you are married. I have no experience in this, but Bear with me. When you are married, right? When you're first dating, you want to talk to them all the time, do things for them all the time, hang out with them all the time, learn things about them all the time, right? Figure out what makes them tick all the time. Clearly, that's what it is, right? It's all the time, right? And then you learn on. And then you get engaged, and the fire's still there, and y'all are completely invested, and you love this, and you're like, I'm going to appreciate you. When we're married, I'm going to cook you breakfast every day. I'm going to do laundry. I'm going to clean the house. You're awesome. I love you. This is great, right? Then you get married. You've been married for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 30 years. And you're just like, you just become complacent. You're like, I already know, yes, I get it. I understand you like This Is Us. Like, I'm not gonna watch it with you. Like, I get it. Like, yes, I understand Sunday night football. Yes, all right. And you just kind of get complacent. You no longer try to figure out what makes you tick, right? Because you're like, I've known you for all of 7 years. Clearly, I know everything to know about you, right? Right? And so what happens is you become complacent. Meanwhile, you still do the same things you do. You cook dinner, right, take care of the kids, go to work, do all these things, but your heart isn't invested as it was before. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's what Jesus is saying to the church of Ephesus, right? That's what he was saying to me, to us. He's like, you've become complacent in your heart. It doesn't matter all the things you do. It's a heart condition, right? And once again, I'm going to say it. I know this firsthand. See, I would say that I'm fairly, really good at self-diagnosing myself. Physically, not so much, because I definitely thought I was dying when I was having heartburn. But I thought like this was the end. I was on my floor, clenching my heart like, Jesus, this is it. Like, I'm done. I'm dead. Like, this is it. And, I ate some Tums, prayed. A few hours later, I was fine, right? So physically, I'm not so much. That's why I just don't even Google my symptoms anymore, because I'm the worst. But internally, I'm really good, right? Internally, when it comes to figuring out what's going on with me, I'm fairly decent at figuring it out, AKA the Lord reveals it to me, right? So he told me that I had become familiar with him. Right? Which is essentially the same thing as being complacent. So do you think, being familiar with somebody is a good thing? Not necessarily, right? And so the thing is, it made a lot of sense to me because I was exhibiting signs that I knew something was going on with me, but I couldn't figure it out. No one would know, right? Because these signs were all in my mind. They all had to do with my thinking, right? I started noticing thoughts that would come up more frequently, and I would like entertain them longer than I normally would, and then I would catch myself like, what? Where in the world is this coming from? Like, why am I thinking these things? What is happening, right? And so for me, there were 3 different mindsets that fueled my complacency. If you can relate it to any of these, then you need to be aware, right? So you can combat those thoughts. But if you can relate to all of these, like me, then we're in trouble, right? So when I say mindset, just so we're all on the same page, what I mean is a mindset, and this is my definition. Don't Google mindset, it might mean something different. But my definition of mindset is you have one dominating thought, right, that affects all your other thoughts. Okay? So it fuels the other thoughts that you have. So the first mindset that I had was, God still loves me, right? So I used to deal with some guilt when I wouldn't read my Bible or I didn't pray, right? If something bad happened to me that day, I would literally be like, this is because I didn't read my Bible this morning. Moni, you only prayed 5 minutes, this is why. This is why you got an offender bender. This is why this is happening to you, right? If I didn't pray enough, right? And that's not the case, right? He never wants us to feel guilty. Right? That's not his MO. He doesn't want us to feel guilty, right? But then one day it clicked, right? A truth that I've known my whole life, it clicked. Moni, God still loves you. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. So if I don't remember to read my Bible or to spend time with him that day, he's not mad at me. He still loves me, right? Now that mindset's freeing, right? The fact that there's nothing I could do to earn God's love. Right? There's nothing that can separate us from the love of God. It's freeing, right? The problem becomes when it's used by the scheme of the enemy to justify your complacency, right? I wasn't feeling guilty anymore because I wasn't spending nearly as much time with God as I knew I should, but I wasn't feeling guilty because I said, God still loves me. But Romans 6:15 says, should we keep on sinning because we know that God will forgive us? No. Should we try to stop, right? Should we try to stop getting close to him because we know he still loves us and we can't earn that love? No. Right? But that was happening in my mind. I justified. I said, God still loves me. I knew and believed that he loved me. And so what did I do with that knowledge? I watched Netflix a little later at night. I set my alarm a little later in the mornings. Right? What happened was he ended up dropping on my priority list. And because of those things, what happened is it triggered mindset number 2, right? And mindset number 2 is, I already know this, right? I've literally been in church my whole life. I've probably heard 1,000 messages. I actually did the math of my age times 52 weeks, minus some, it's over 1,000, right? So I've literally heard 1,000 messages, right? I've read the Bible in its entirety minus Numbers and Deuteronomy. I've done that multiple times, right? There's nothing that I can say, that you can say that I don't know, unless obviously you're speaking about Numbers and Deuteronomy, then I'm lost, right? See, that's the problem. Those are my thoughts, right? Those were how I was thinking. I already know this, right? I've heard this before. Right? I used to spend my days listening to messages while I'm working, right? I lost desire to do all of that because I already knew it. I already knew it, right? And the thing is, if you look at the root of that mindset, you will find a little seed called pride, right? Never, ever, ever in a million years would I ever say that I struggled with pride, right? In my mind, pride is something arrogant people struggle with. I don't know, not me, right? I didn't realize it was pride until one Tuesday night at Bible study, right? We've been studying this book called Lead Like Jesus, and it's teaching us how to lead like Jesus, right? And so we talk a lot about fear and pride and how it motivates our decisions. And I normally don't really listen to the pride because I'm like, it doesn't affect me, which is pride within itself right there, right? And so, but one day they were talking about pride and how, and we talked about this word named ego, right? And ego stands for edging God out, right? So my mindset of, I already know this, was edging God out, right? I wasn't getting closer to him, I was literally pushing him out. And once that happened, you know there's a problem. See, and I didn't realize what it was. I knew that something wasn't right. I knew something wasn't clicking in my head. I knew that I would sit in the back and be like, I already know this. My dad brought great messages, and I'm sitting there like, I already know this. In my mind, my heart was like, I already know this. I used to listen to preachers all the time, and I'm like, I already know this. There are so many things that I don't know, y'all. It's ridiculous. But that was my mindset, was I already know this, right? And so that problem led to another problem, which was mindset number 3. Which is, I don't want to, right? I love to serve. If you didn't know, I serve in many different capacities in the church. Not gonna list them, right? Just know it's a lot, right? But I love to serve. I have people say a servant's heart, and that's because I love to serve. And the thing is, this mindset attacked my willingness to serve literally in the worst way. Right? I would always do it, right? Because I've made commitments and I'm not about dropping commitments. But it went from something that I love to do to something that I didn't want to do at all, right? I teach the teenagers on Sundays and Wednesdays. And I ask my parents, they'll tell you, love the teenagers literally with my whole heart, right? But when it came to teaching them, I didn't want to. When it came to leading worship on Wednesdays, I didn't want to. When it came to going to Tuesday night Bible studies, I didn't want to, right? When it came to miming that I love, I didn't want to. I remember someone even asked me to minister in August at a youth event. They asked me to mime. I didn't want to, but I said yes, right? I figured, justify this youth event, I'll bring 2 teenagers, we'll do a piece with them, so therefore I'm not miming by myself because I don't want to. Right? And so she asked me, I told her, I said, yes, I'm going to do a piece with 2 teenagers and we'll do that. And she was like, okay, great. Can you do a piece by yourself? And I was like, no. And in my mind came up with a million reasons to justify my no, but at the pit of my stomach, it was because I didn't want to, right? At the pit of my stomach, it was because the seed of this mindset is selfishness, right? And it wasn't until I had this conversation with my mom, and she was like, you're being selfish. And I was like, I know, but I don't want to. And she was like, it's not your gift to decide what you want to do with it or not. And I was like, you're right. So I told her yes, and I repented so hard because I could not minister with that kind of mindset and heart condition, right? So I did it. I ended up doing 2 pieces, and it was fine. It was great, right? My heart was gripped by selfishness, right? So the problem with pride and with selfishness is it elevates you over others, right? And more importantly, over God, right? These 3 mindsets and all the thoughts that came with them have been attacking my mind for months, right? And like in the worst way. And what makes it worse is it didn't just affect one area of my life, right? You see this guitar sitting right here? It's there every Sunday, right? You think, oh, that's great, guitar there every Sunday. No, it belongs at my house, so I can practice. But every time you see it here, that means it's not at my house. That means, guess what? I'm not practicing. I'm not, right? And that means when I first got the guitar, you couldn't get me to stop playing that guitar. I'd go to Quanah's house and I'd bring the guitar. I'd go to my friend's house and I'd bring the guitar. I'd come home from school and I'd play the guitar. Now, it has literally been weeks, and that guitar has been sitting right there, convicting me every Sunday, right? So I've even plateaued in some friendships, right? I used to be really adamant about reaching out to people and talking to them and checking in on them and responding with text messages in a reasonable amount of time, and I have failed or plateaued like really bad in that area. Brittany will text me and it'll be like 12 hours later, hey Britt, what's up? And I'm like, I'm sorry. It's because when I plateaued, and what I've learned is that your spiritual relationship with God or lack thereof will affect your everyday life. Not just one. It's not, oh, this is my spiritual life, my personal life, and my everything else is fine. This is just over here. No. You are one being, right? You are one. So my spiritual relationship or my lack thereof or my complacency affected every area of my life, right? So can you guys relate with anything that I'm saying? All right, so after, right, the Lord revealed all of these things to me, I had a choice to make. What was I going to do about it? I could stay plateaued, right? I could stay on this plateau or not. I can continue to be complacent or not. The reality is, like I said, my thoughts have been bothering me for months, but not enough for me to actually do something about it, right? That's the problem. Many people have, and Lele was talking about this the other day. Her friend was telling her that, there are things about ourselves that we don't like, right? But if it bothered us nearly as much as we complained about it, we would change it. But we don't, right? And I could see, and I'm not justifying this, I could see how people could slip away from church. If you get any of these mindsets, it's easy to just, I don't want to. I already know this. They're not going to say something I don't know. To slip away. If I wasn't committed in everything, it would have been easy for me to slip away. But I knew I had commitments, and I wasn't going to drop those commitments, right? So I was at a standstill. I was like, Moni, what are you going to do, right? I knew that in revealing this to me, the Lord was trying to get my attention, right? So there is no way I know he wanted me to stay with these mindsets. I know he doesn't want any of us to stay with these mindsets, right? So I decided something's got to change, right? I literally could not keep living this way, right? So I decided to go to my prayer room. After the movie War Room, I was like, I'm making a prayer closet, right? And I'll stay in the prayer closet maybe like 2 weeks at a time, and then 6 months will go by and I'll see the movie again and I'm like, back to the prayer closet. And then, right? So I'm getting consistent. I am, right? So my intentions were, I'm going to my prayer closet and I'm going to spend all the time with Jesus, right? But the reality was, y'all, it was a struggle, right? I was praying, wasn't feeling nothing. I was reading, wasn't getting nothing out of it, right? I was literally so discouraged. I was like, Lord, this is so hard, right? And so one day he told me, and this really like opened my mind, he said, stop trying to do things when you're with me. He said, just be with me. And I was like, oh, which makes sense because my favorite pastime in life is doing nothing with someone. Like if we could do nothing together, it's a good day. It's great, right? I do it with Bray, I did it with my friend Rachel. I went all the way to Nashville, Tennessee for us to do nothing together. It was great, right? Right? And that's what the Lord was telling me to do. He said, stop trying to do this or do that. He said, put on worship music and just be. Right? So many times we get discouraged, right? When we try to spend time with God and it doesn't go as planned, we fall asleep, done that many times, right? We don't have a clue what we just read, or we can't hear him like others can, and we just stop, right? We give up. But I want to tell you, don't stop. Don't give up. It may not go as you've hoped, but God literally loves spending time with you. Right? I would suggest start by just spending time. Like I said, don't try to be like, I'm gonna pray 10 minutes, pray 30 minutes, read a whole book. Like, no, just be. Right? God made us human beings, not human doings. So just be. Like, put on worship music and just be. Right? So I kept asking God, how do I get off of this plateau? Right? Because I've come to the point where I realized I was on this plateau. I realized what it was. Because for a while I had no clue what it was. Right? Now I realized what it was, and now I'm at the place where I don't want to be on it anymore. But I'm stuck. So how do I get off? Right? And I believe that he led me to John 15. John 15 says, verse 1, I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so that they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. Right? For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Right? So what Jesus is describing here, that was Jesus talking, is relationship. Right? He was describing his relationship with the Father, our relationship with him, and our relationship with God. Right? So God is the gardener. Jesus is the vine. We are the branches. Right? The job of the branch is to produce fruit. The job of the vine is to provide nourishment or life for the branches. Right? And the job of the gardener is to make sure that the branches produce fruit. Right? Since we are branches, in order for us to produce fruit, we must stay connected to the vine. Right? We must remain. So if you look at the first 16 verses of John 15, the word remain, or depending on your translation, stay or abide, shows up 10 times. 10 times in 16 verses, right? Which leads me to believe that the idea of remaining, staying, abiding, right, was very important to Jesus, because I don't see him as the type of guy to waste words. He says everything with intentionality. So if he said the word abide 10 times, he's trying to get our attention, right? So he wanted the disciples to get the concept back. Like, he wanted them to understand that you have to stay connected to me. And so that message for the disciples 2,000 years ago is the same message he wants us to get today, right? So what does staying connected, right, and producing fruit have to do with complacency? It's because I believe that complacency can sever our connection to the vine, right? So that may sound extreme, but complacent people aren't producing the type of fruit that God is looking for, right? It says in verse 2 that he cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit. Then in verse 4 it says that a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine. I would even say that if you're severed from the vine, not only do you produce fruit, but you produce rotten fruit, right? Think about it. Once you take grapes off of the vine, they don't continue to grow, they start to rot. It's just a matter of eating them before they rot. We eat a bag of grapes a day, literally, right? And so what I was noticing was I was starting to manifest and see the manifestation of rotten fruit in my thinking, right? But what is rotten fruit, right? What is that in real life? Rotten, it's not fruit. I'm not having no apples and things in my mind, right? And so according to Galatians 5:19 and 21, right, rotten fruit, I would say, can be defined as your sinful nature, right? So it says, very clear, sexual immorality, impurity, lust for pleasures, idolatry, sorcery, hostility, quarreling, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambition, right? Dissension, division, envy, drunkenness, wild parties, and other sins like these. Let me tell you again, this is Paul speaking, as I have before, that anyone living that sort of life will not inherit the kingdom of God, right? I have it also in the message that I want to show you. I think I have it up there for the screen. Oh, nope, I don't. Go back. It's fine. Go back. Don't look. I forgot it. It's completely fine. Just listen, right? It says, this is the message of the same verse. He says, it is obvious what kind of life develops out of trying to get your own way all the time. AKA, it is obvious to tell what kind of life, comes out of you becoming complacent, right? Repetitive, loveless, cheap sex. A stinking accumulation of mental and emotional garbage. Frenzied and joyless grabs of happiness, trinket gods, magic show religions, paranoid loneliness, cutthroat competitions, all-consuming yet never satisfying wants, a brutal temper, right? The impotence to love or to be loved, divided homes and divided lives, small-minded and lopsided pursuits, the vicious habit of depersonalizing everyone to a rival, uncontrollable and uncontrolled addictions, ugly parodies of the community, and it says, I could go on, right? And that's the same verse in the message. I think those are rotten fruit, right? So take inventory of your thoughts. What is the dominating thought, right, in your life? Is it any of these that I mentioned? I know for me, I started to see little nubs of jealousy form in my thoughts, little nubs of selfish ambition form in my thoughts, little nubs of pride in my thoughts, right? And if we're not actively trying to remain and stay connected to the vine, we're going to produce rotten fruit. Like, that's the default. It's not like you've connected rotten fruit or you can live disconnected and not produce rotten fruit. It's either stay connected or produce rotten fruit. It's like either or. Live, die. Live in your thinking, die in your thinking, right? Those are your only two options, right? And so here's the thing. The devil literally loves it when we get stuck in complacency, right? It's because we're producing rotten fruit. And if we're producing rotten fruit, guess what we're not producing? Good fruit. And what is good fruit? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control, right? The fruits of the spirits. But I would like to say that that's not the only fruit, right? Our fruit can also be answered prayer, right? And I say that because in verse 7 it says, if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it will be granted, right? Your connection to the vine has an impact on your answers to prayer. So have you been praying for things for a while? So there's a difference, right? You could pray for something like Daniel and God was like, listen, I heard you and sent the angels day one, but they've been fighting. Or there's you praying for things, but you have been connected, so you're not seeing the fruit of that prayer, right? There's a difference, right? The enemy knows that if he can get you disconnected from the vine, then that can hinder your answers to prayer, which will then make you discouraged and not want to keep on praying, right? Which will then ultimately draw you away from God, right? So that's why it is so important to stay connected to the vine. right? Then verse 5, it says at the end, it says, apart from me, you can do nothing. So if Philippians 4:13 is true, which says I can do all things through Christ, then the opposite must be true. Right? Apart from Christ, we can do nothing of heavenly worth or value. We literally cannot produce fruit without him. We are left to our own devices, right? And I really, really, really understood what that meant, right? During this last season of this Plateau life, right? Because I saw it affect me in my life. So I like to give advice, right? I really, truly believe that God graced me for the ability to speak into people's lives and to encourage them. Not tooting my horn, because I'm probably not the best, but I really felt like I was graced in that area, right? And me trying to give advice not connected to the vine is a hot mess, right? I can't gather my thoughts. I can't form complete, accurate statements. I'm honestly not even sure if I'm making sense. I'm not even sure. And the problem is, during the season, I was still giving advice to people. And I'd leave there like, Lord, I don't know what I said. So if I gave you advice over these last few months, I apologize. If it made no sense at all, I apologize, right? So I'm sorry. But I realized that I can't do this without God, right? It just shows that without him, we're but clay. I literally can't. I told my mom, I said, I talk in spider webs. I don't know what I'm trying to say. And in my mind, I'm like, if I don't know what I'm saying, they have no clue what I'm saying. But anyways, right? So thanks be to Jesus, I'm getting my life back. Right. So what do you do if you think you're losing connection from the vine? Right? What do you do if you've actually been complacent for a while? Let's say you've been severed. What do you do? Right? Because in real life, when it comes to planting and stuff, if you break off a plant, you can't reattach it, right? The connection is severed. Well, plot twist, actually you can, right? And I didn't know this. Oh wait, don't show it yet. Sorry. I didn't know this, right? And I just kept doing research because I'm like, what does this have to do with this? And God kept bringing to my heart the idea of tying plants together. And I'm like, tying plants together, is that a thing? I see people tie plants to sticks to make them stand up straight and go straight, but I'm tying plants together, and I'm like, I don't know, right? So anyways, I was Googling and I was doing some research, and I thought it was one thing, but I actually found out that it was something else even better. It's this thing called grafting and budding. Okay, now you can. There it is. All right. So grafting and budding are gardening techniques used to join parts from two or more plants so they appear to grow as one single plant. Right? In grafting, the upper part of the plant, right, grows on the root system of another plant. In budding, you can show the next one, I have a picture. In budding, a bud is taken from one plant and grown to another. The practice of grafting can be traced back 4,000 years, right, to ancient China and Mesopotamia, right? The new plant that grows from the top of that grows on the top, or the bud, will be exactly like the plant it came from. These methods of plant reproduction have usually chosen because these methods give the plant a certain characteristic of the rootstock. So the plant that's connected gets characteristics of the root, right? And those characteristics are hardiness, drought tolerance, I should say, and disease resistance, right? So what that is in nature is saying that this plant got disconnected, but all hope is not lost. You can literally get connected back to the vine, right, and still receive the nutrients and life that the vine provides, right? And what I realized last night was this is what Paul was talking about in Romans 11 when he was talking about grafting in the Gentiles. In Romans 11, he says grafting in. And I think my whole life I thought it was drafting in, like the draft. I'm not sure. But when I looked at that, I was like, bro, that's not new. Paul literally talks about grafting in the Gentiles. right? So if you go back, I want to go back to the other picture. What you see is the top, the bottom, and then you see how it is tied together, right? So what I've realized and what I've learned is this idea of grafting and budding is grace. This is literally an example of God's grace in nature, right? God is using plants to say to us, listen, I know you're flawed, right? I know what you want to do, you don't do. I see that. I see the condition of your heart, and I won't even let you get burned, right? Because they say if they fall off, you get burned away. But he says, listen, I'm going to graft you back in, right? I'm going to connect you back to the source, right? To my son Jesus. And guess what? You will be stronger than you were before, right? So grafting and budding, this thing that they do in gardening and all that fun stuff is grace. So that if we have been complacent, if we have done things to sever that tie, we're not connected to the vine, all hope is not lost. We can get connected back to the vine, right? So if you notice on this picture, once the tree is attached to the other tree or the plant to the other plant, it is wrapped around tightly, right, by some rope. Right? It is wrapped around until it can stand on its own. I actually have a real life example of a picture of what grafting looks like. There it is. See, in between that circle is where the two plants were connected. And it could now live on its own, right? And so just like how the rope wrapped around those two plants to connect them as one, we as believers need to wrap ourselves. Okay? Watch this. All W's. You ready? Okay? We need to wrap ourselves in the Word, right? If you're struggling to read the Bible, get an accountability partner. Read with someone until you're strong enough to do it on your own. Because trying to get back into this on your own is a big feat, and it can be discouraging for anybody. Doesn't matter how long you've been saved, right? I've been saved my whole life. Right, right? So you need to wrap yourselves in the Word, right? You need to wrap yourself in worship, right? Corporate worship will always be harder if you don't worship at home, right? Change what you listen to on your way to school. Change what you listen to on your way to work. Start feeding your mind songs of praise and worship to the Lord, because then guess what? It will start to be in your spirit, and you'll wake up with songs in your heart and songs in your mind. I know for me, lately, I've been listening a lot to The Greatest Showman, so perhaps that's what I've been waking up to in my mind is The Greatest Showman, but you have to start replacing that. I've been replacing it so that when I wake up, my mom always has a song in her heart when she wakes up, always, and that's because it's an atmosphere of worship. She's creating an atmosphere of worship, right? So if you do that at home, guess what? When you come together, it's not going to be like pulling teeth. You're going to want to do these things, right? The next thing you need to wrap yourself with, worthy friends, right? Your inner circle needs to be able to call down heaven on your behalf, right? Christina, she's not here. She has probably like the biggest group of intercessor friends I've ever met. And they're not like, God bless them, God bless this. It's literally they are calling down fire from heaven. Like I've seen it. I have it too. So I'm not just saying only she does. I have friends who can call down fire from heaven on my behalf. But you need to be able to have friends who can pray for you, right? The friends you surround yourself with need to be able to encourage you, right? To keep you accountable. Right? To pray for you, to worship with you, but also be able to speak truth to you. They need to be able to be like, Mona, you know you're not right. But you said you shouldn't have said that. Right? You didn't act right. You shouldn't have done that, right? But there have to be somebody that you feel comfortable opening up to. If you wrap yourselves with the Word and with worship and with worthy friends, then the last thing that you need to wrap yourself with is willing prayer. Right? So the word willing means ready, right? Or another word is eager or enthusiastic, right? So you probably won't feel that way when you start praying, but I believe if you keep at it, you'll be ready and eager and willing to talk to God, right? It'll even become the highlight of your whole day. And I know this firsthand. Many of you know, but some of you probably don't know. about 4 years ago, I went to Georgia to spend 3 months at this place called the House of Prayer. And guess what they do at the House of Prayer? They pray. And I was like, nah, this is great. I love Jesus. I pray. Let's do this. Little did I know that they were going to say from 10 to 6, you're in the prayer room. And I was like, wait, what? 10 to 6, yes, all right, let's pass the time. Jesus together, you and me, 10 to 6, right? It was even points where I'm like, I don't think I'm saved. Like, I'd watch people and how they worship and how they pray, and I'm like, I don't know Jesus. Like, I just clearly, I thought I knew him, but I don't. That wasn't the case. I just never built in the habit of praying as much as I should, or just like spending time with Jesus, right? So at first, when I went there in September, 10 to 6 literally it seemed like 10 to 6 was a week long. 10 to 6 in the prayer room, praying and like reading the Bible and stuff was forever. I'd fall asleep. I'd be like, I'm going to read this book. I'd be like, I'm going to pray. I'm writing in my journal. And I was like, this is impossible, right? But by November, 10 to 6 was like, this is nothing. 10 to 6, I'm about to spend all day with Jesus. There was times where I was like, I'm going to come back at night. I did this once, and I said I spent 10 to 6. I'm going to come back and do night watch, which is from midnight to 6 a.m. Because I'm like, I love spending time with Jesus. Now, can all of us spend 8 hours like that in a prayer room? No. But what it did was it cultivated a habit, right? And there are things that I learned in that prayer room, how to pass the time. Because I asked them, I said, how do y'all do this? Like, how do you do this? And they're like, oh, we make a schedule. And I was like, a schedule? Yes. There it is, right? So that's what I want to challenge you guys to do. Make a schedule. I'm not saying 10 to 6. I'm not even saying 10 to 11. 15-minute block. Make a schedule. Put on a worship song, 5 minutes. Pray, 5 minutes. Right? Read your Bible, 5 minutes. And then add time to that. And grow from there. And do it more. Right? The more you do that, the more you will love to spend time with Jesus. In my prayer closet, when I go in there, I have a schedule. And it's for an hour. That's my goal to get back to. And it's like 10-minute blocks. Pray for 10 minutes, journal for 10 minutes, listen for 10 minutes. Because if you can't hear God in the silence, it's going to be really hard to hear him in the noise, right? And I don't want to have to be like, all right, God, speak to me now, speak to me now. Okay, to hear him. I want to just be going through my life and being able to hear him, right? And so, I went off script, but it's completely fine. Right, it will be impossible it's impossible, right, in my opinion, to know Jesus and not love him, right? Those who don't love him don't actually know him, like they don't. So once you know him, you will love him. That I guarantee you, right? And so this is where I have been, right, spiritually. But I don't believe I'm the only person dealing with this. Right? So the enemy will want me to think that I'm alone in this, right? That I'm the only one going through this, that everyone else is fine, right? They might be in the hill, they might be in the valley, on the hill, whatever. But I am the only one person on this plateau. And that's not the case, right? But I know that, right, God doesn't waste, and I'll say to this in Sunday school, God doesn't waste an experience. He doesn't. Right? So that's why I'm sharing this with you today. I've been struggling with much so that I could overcome and share this with you. Right? So I have been wrapping myself in the Word and with worship and with worthy friends and in willing prayer. And it is not always enjoyable. I know that. But the Lord is dealing with my heart, right? He's dealing with my mind and my selfish thoughts and my prideful thoughts. And I just ask in closing that you pray for me as I pray for you. Yeah.